The dream of making computer understands the image. As computers advanced, the idea that they could recognize and understand images began to take shape. While creating any image on a computer with millions of colors was possible, teaching a computer to recognize an image was an entirely different challenge. For instance, how could a machine identify that a scanned image is a cat, especially when there are millions of images of cats in different poses and environments? How did they make computers understand images? 1. Breaking down the image. The first step in teaching computers to recognize images was to break down the image into smaller parts, like tiny squares of color called pixels. Each pixel carries information about its color and position in the image. But while the computer could now collect this information, it still lacked the ability to connect these pieces in a meaningful way. How could it understand that all these pixels together formed an image of a cat? This required something more, a way to analyze and interpret the data, much like how the human brain processes what we see. 2. So, scientists worked to understand the human brain. Our brains are incredibly powerful, made up of billions of neurons, which are tiny cells that process and transmit information. When we look at something, like a cat, our brain doesn't process the entire image at once. Instead, different groups of neurons focus on specific features. Some neurons detect the edges of the cat's body, others recognize the texture of its fur, and still others notice its movement. These neurons work together in layers, gradually building a complete understanding of what we're seeing. 3. Inspired by the human brain, they created the artificial neural network. Inspired by how our brains work, scientists and developers created artificial neurons in computers. These artificial neurons, which are essentially computer programs, operate similarly to human neurons, analyzing the image pixel by pixel. They are organized into layers, forming what's known as a neural network. Just like in the human brain, each artificial neuron in a neural network focuses on a specific aspect of the image. In the first layer, neurons might detect simple patterns like edges or colors. As the information passes through deeper layers, the neurons start recognizing more complex patterns, such as shapes, textures, and even specific features like the cat's eyes or ears. Now, when an image is labeled as cat, the program or model associates this particular pattern of shapes, colors, and textures with the concept of a cat. So, every time an image is uploaded to the model, like in vision models such as ChatGPT, the image is broken down into pixels. The model then analyzes each pixel to gather information about shapes, colors, and textures. When it identifies a familiar pattern, it can describe the image as a cat. 4. So, if we train the computer or software with lots of data, to teach the neural network to recognize these patterns consistently, developers and scientists fed it millions of labeled images. During this training, the neural network adjusted its connections, making the correct paths stronger to help it recognize the features of the object it was learning. Over time, this training helped the computer learn to identify objects with high accuracy. To ensure the model's reliability, developers tested it by uploading images without labeling them as cat. The model would then break down the image into tiny pieces or pixels, collect information about shapes, colors, and textures, and compare the pattern it derived with what it had already learned. If the model made a mistake, such as mistaking a bird for a cat, it would reprocess the image, possibly millions of times, until it could recognize the pattern correctly and provide the right output. After thorough testing, the model became highly accurate in recognizing cats in any image. The same process could then be applied to recognize other animals, people, objects, and more. 5. Creating new images, going beyond recognition. Because the algorithm had learned every single detail about cats in millions of different positions and environments, it could now go a step further. The computer could create entirely new images of cats in scenarios it had never seen before. For instance, it could generate an image of a cat playing chess, boxing, or even swimming, activities a real cat might never engage in. The same principles apply to all animals, humans, and objects. Whether it's a dog flying a plane, a human astronaut on Mars, or a dinosaur riding a bicycle, the AI can create these imaginative images by combining its deep understanding of patterns and details learned during training. 6. After training, how it works. Once training is complete, the neural network is capable of not only recognizing images independently but also creating entirely new images based on the patterns it has learned. This creative ability is a direct result of the sophisticated training and design by developers and scientists. 7. Model updates and continuous improvement. Even after the initial training, developers continue to refine and update the neural network. They introduce new algorithms and additional training data to improve accuracy and handle new tasks. This ongoing work ensures that the AI remains effective and can tackle more complex challenges. However, it's important to remember that while the AI can recognize and even create images, it does not truly comprehend them as we do. In conclusion, AI can recognize an image by following 3 steps. First, it breaks the image down into pixels. Then, it gathers information from these pixels, like edges, colors, and textures, to create a pattern. Finally, it compares this pattern with the ones it learned during training. If it finds a match, it checks the label and identifies the image as an animal, human, object, or whatever it might be. While AI can now recognize and create images with incredible speed and creativity, it's important to acknowledge that these capabilities are built upon the foundations laid by human intelligence.